year one of Red Autry as the head coach of Syracuse, the Jim Boeheim era over, and Cuse was all right. They won 20 games. They were in the bubble mix definitely in February. Had some really fun guard play, and the emergence of Chris Pell was awesome to see. So, Judah Mintz is gone, but you bring in a really intriguing freshman in Donnie Freeman, an experienced transfer in Jaquan Carlos, and a fun guy that I've always loved watching, Eddie Lampkin, to go alongside JJ Starling and Chris Bell. Christian and Nick here with Donna Ditota of Syracuse.com. Donna, thank you for joining us. Tell us, do you think Syracuse can build on what they did last season in year one under Red Autry, and what the expectations are for this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think winning 20 games with that team last year was something of a miracle. They were very small. They couldn't really rebound. They had a hard time guarding inside. And, it was the first year of a completely new regime, a new style of play. They played man defense last year instead of zone, although they did toward the end of the season play a little more zone than they had at the beginning of the season. And there was a bunch of issues on that team last year. So the fact that they won 20 is really something short of nothing short of a miracle to me. And, I'm super interested in this team. There's 7 new guys. You mentioned a couple of them. And there's another guy, Chance Westry is probably going to be available this year. Adrian was just telling us this morning that he's been sick for a couple of weeks. But he is a guy who was a really highly recruited guy, went to Auburn his freshman year, had a knee injury, didn't play most of that season, came to Syracuse last year before the first game. It was before the first even intra-squad scrimmage. He hurt his knee and didn't play at all last year. So I think he's another guy that people are super curious about. And Adrian says he's back to full health in terms of his knee. And it's just, he just has got a little, I think he described it as a bump in the road for what's going to happen with him, over the short term.
Like you said, it kind of was nothing short of a miracle last season, winning 20 games. But like Syracuse and me last year, I told Chris this all the time. It was like they didn't lose anybody they were supposed to lose to. And the only team they beat that they weren't supposed to beat was UNC. Like they were very predictable at times, in my opinion. And this roster this season, like I'm really excited for it. I wasn't as high as Syracuse last season, but I love this roster coming in. And like there's a lot of guys I could start with, like this personnel, like who I want to talk about, but one guy I'm really excited about, I've heard really good things, is this 5-star freshman, Donnie Freeman.
Yeah.
So what can you tell us about him to expect in year one?
So I just talked to Donnie on Saturday at an NIL event, in fact. And he was, he's a top 10 recruit and a 5-star guy. And they don't get a lot of those here at Syracuse. So he's been very ballyhooed, so to speak, up here. I think he's trying to be as level-headed as he can possibly be about expectations for him. He told me that the biggest expectations that he's worried about fulfilling are to his coach and to his teammates and to his family and to his agent and all that. He's trying to block out all the outside noise. I think one of the things about him that is intriguing is he's a big, long, he's not big, he's a fairly slender kid, but he's long and lean. He's probably 6'10". Can shoot the three, can score inside. He's a really good athlete. And I think that they're hoping that he can provide them with some defense, with some rebounding and some scoring too. They like I said, they were so small last year. They had along their back line, they had a 6'8" center, a 6'6" power forward, and a 6'5" or 6'6" small forward. So the fact that they've gotten so much bigger along that back line, I think it's going to help them in a whole bunch of different ways.
Yeah, you mentioned the size. Rebounding wise, they were in the bottom 50 in offensive rebounding percentage and the bottom 60 in defensive rebounding percentage. And Malik Brown was a good player. I liked what he did. I think he's going to be solid for Duke this year. But and then Naheem McLeod wasn't making much of an impact and dealt with injuries and everything. But
he didn't play the second half of the year, so
right. But even when he was in, it wasn't like he was. He didn't
average 2 blocks a game though, like. Barely.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing with Nakeem. I think, I don't know that he's ever going to be like an offensive juggernaut, but the thing that they really could have used him for is to protect the inside. You had a guy who was like you mentioned Malik, and Malik is a very, very good defender, but Malik's 6'8". And at times he and Justin Taylor, who was 6'6", were trying to guard 6'11", 6'10", and it was just an impossible task to ask of those two guys. But so they've gotten a lot bigger. And Naheem is a guy, if he plays 15 minutes a game, can block a couple of shots or make teams a little less interested in getting inside the lane and either throwing up a shot or kicking it out. I mean, that's something that they really need from him, and they need him to rebound too.
Right. My point was more just he's never got playing more than 15 minutes. He was averaging 14 minutes a game. So it was like they were going to lack size whether they had him or not just because he wasn't playing, 25, 30 minutes a game. But you bring in Eddie Lampkin, who's a guy that is just a ball of energy, a really good post scorer, is a really good passer out of the post.
Right.
A little bit sometimes of a wild card, like at TCU, just kind of disappeared from the team. I don't know if it was arguing with Jamie Dixon. There were different rumors and everything. It goes to Colorado, and then there was some weird just rumors about him, his portal recruitment to NI just this summer. So anyways, he's a bit of a wild card, but he's a really good player. Can you tell us about what you've heard from him? And he seems very charismatic too. He seems like a guy that could come in and just, his personality shines through right away.
Yeah, I mean, what they need from him, and I think what they're going to get from him is a post presence. They can throw the ball in there, and people have to guard him, right? I think in the last year in particular, they didn't really have a post presence. They had no interior offense, and so people were just really, really trying to guard the perimeter. Like Chris Bell, who I think shot 42% from three last year, he was like double teamed in a bunch of games. And because he was like the only guy who can consistently make threes, I think they have more 3-point shooters this year. And I think it's going to help that they have somebody like Eddie, who teams have to guard in there.
Right.
He's like I said, he's a good pass. And like you said, too, he's a very good passer. And I think that's one of the things they're hoping. I mean, eventually they want to get to a 5-out situation here at Syracuse. And I think by bringing him out sometimes too, it can open up the middle. They have drivers, and he can get them the ball.
There's another guy in the front court that I really like from Delaware, Jair Davis. Yeah. He's a little undersized, at 6'7". He doesn't shoot the three, so the 5-out spacing isn't really a thing with him because he's only 25% from three. But he's a guy I really like. He's a bit unorthodox, average 17 a game. Is he like the backup 5 to Eddie, or do you think they're going to slide him in at the 4? How do you? I
think he's going to play the 4. I mean, that's what I think he's going to play. And I like a lot of things about him too. I'm really interested to see him play. I've only seen tape of him. Haven't seen him live, but he's a big, strong, physical, tough kid. And that's another thing that I think Syracuse lacked last year, with some physicality, with some toughness. And I think he's got a big body. He was a very, very good rebounder. And again, we've talked about, Syracuse really struggled to rebound the ball. And he's a guy that guys on the team have said is a steady presence. He's got a lot of experience. He knows how to play. And I think that they really respect him for all of that.
So JJ Starling comes back. He was super highly touted out of high school. Comes to Notre Dame, Syracuse, and definitely gets his footing as a sophomore. The 3-point. So the kind of thing with him and Mintz was neither of them could really shoot threes. So they were really good at getting downhill and could score in the mid range. But Starling got better as a 3-point shooter as the season went along. And you bring him, and he's an off guard, but he has point guard abilities as well.
He's going to handle the ball. He's going to handle the ball a lot more this year.
Right. But Carlos is kind of a pure point guard. How do you see those guys fitting together?
Well, I think Adrian's thing is that he wants everybody to be able to make plays, right? So if you have two guards who can make plays and who can score, that's great. And I think with JJ last year, I mean, he played with Judah, who had the ball a lot. So I don't know that he had as many opportunities as he probably will get this year, because there's not as much of a ball dominant point guard as there was last year. I think the problem with JJ and his jump shot was he hurt his shoulder when he was at Notre Dame. And so he spent all the season, all the preseason last year, all the summer trying to get his mechanics back on his jump shot. So I think it was kind of a work in progress. He was then playing on that shoulder that he was trying to sort of relearn how to shoot. And, you're thinking about it and the game's going on. And I think as the season went on, he got much better at shooting the ball. And I think he's one of the keys of the team this year. I really do. I think I don't know if either of you had seen him play in high school, but he was a dynamic, just really, really good high school basketball player.
We've done a lot of these podcasts now, and it seems like everyone we talk to, like, their favorite teams are when they have two ball handlers, like two point guards on the floor at the same time. So, like, a guy, Carlos, who averaged 6 assists last season, paired up with JJ, like, that could be a really fun dynamic. Another guy I'm kind of intrigued about and have a question about is Lucas Taylor. Averaged 15 at Georgia State. Started his career, I think, at Wake Forest, right, Chris?
He started at Wake Forest, yeah.
Right. So what can we expect out of him?
Well, I think the thing about Lucas is I've been hearing that he's shot the ball really well. And again, they were not a very good shooting team last year. They didn't have a whole lot of options shooting the ball. And I think he's taller than I thought he would be. He's taller and bigger than I thought he would be. So I think he's probably 6'5", 6'6"-ish, maybe 6'7"-ish. I'm not sure precisely how tall he is, but you have a bigger guy on the perimeter shooting. That's obviously a huge thing for them. And I think he's, from what everybody's told me, he's fit in. The thing about this year's team that everybody has said consistently is everybody gets along, everybody's sharing the ball, it's going really well. So again, not a single game has been played. Not a single team has lost a game. So these are fairly common things you hear, but I think these are guys are truly sort of getting along, and I think they're building chemistry. They're doing things outside of basketball. And, it helps when you have guys like Lucas Taylor and Eddie and Jaquan and Jair and Peter, the guy that they got from France, who don't really know anything about the system and how they play. It's good that they have had these sort of gatherings where they can all kind of get to know each other.
And we don't have to dig into the drama, but I think it was a big moment in Red's first season to get Benny Williams out of the program, to send a message, I guess, to the team. I don't know everything about the story, so I don't want to speak for that. But I guess when you talk about the chemistry, the good vibes, whenever a player leaves your program, there's always something a little like during the season. There's always just an undertone of what happened there. Sometimes it can just be the kid. But I don't know. I thought that was interesting for Benny. Do you know where is he also now? Do you know?
He's at UCF. Yeah, he's in Central Florida. Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to say too much about the Benny situation, although I do think, you'd be, blind not to recognize that something was going on within the program last year. And I don't think I don't want to put it all on him. I mean, there were things that happened last year that I'm sure the program is happy to be moving on to the next level. But I mean, I don't know, these things happen. And I've always liked Benny. I've always had a good relationship with Benny, and I wish him well. I hope he does well at UCF.
So I mentioned Lucas. So Lucas Taylor started at Wake, and I don't want to be a hater, but there's two players on this team that I have been on kind of, I don't know, guys that I just have not really been fans of. Lucas at Wake, he started a bit his sophomore year, and you mentioned his size. Like, he is an athlete. He can really shoot the ball when he's open and feeling confident. But there were times where, and then he fell out of the rotation because it's just like, we need you to hit these shots and like make some good decisions, and like it just wasn't there consistently. And I had a feeling when he went down to the mid-major level that he was going to get his flow back a bit, right? And he definitely did. He wasn't super efficient for that Georgia State team, but I guess, do you know what his like mindset is, or how many minutes he thinks he's going to get? Because this is a guy who was recruited, starts the ACC, goes down, now he's coming back up. Is he ready to be a guy playing 15, 20 minutes a game who's a 3-and-D, and he knows that's his role, and that he knows that if he's going to make money playing basketball, he needs to be a 3-and-D guy? Or does he think more of that? And I'm parlaying this with Kyle Cuffey. He was a guy that blew my mind last year ever played over Kadir Copeland, because Kadir Copeland did every possible winning thing, and Kyle Cuffey would turn the ball over and miss threes. And like I said, I don't mean to be a hater, but can you give me reasons to be optimistic about those two guys heading into the season?
Well, I think there's a lot going on the team that you may, if you're not involved in the team on a day-to-day basis, you might not know about. So that's number one. Number two, I think Kyle can really help them this year. He's a very good athlete. He's a tough kid. He can rebound the ball. And I think he was also a guy who hadn't played in 2 years. He was hurt for 2 years, and he was just coming off a pretty brutal injury at his last destination. And we'll see. I mean, he's a pretty confident guy, and he's lost a ton of weight this year. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of things he can contribute. As far as Lucas goes, we have not talked. I've met him. I've said hello to him. I've chit-chatted with him. I've not had an in-depth interview with Lucas, so I don't know what he is projecting about himself for this season. Syracuse's media day is coming up next week, so at that point we'll have a better chance to talk to some of these guys and maybe ask that very question.
And then a little bit more about Chris Bell. He was awesome last year, and when you mentioned that Syracuse wants to move to this 5-out style, I'm starting to think about a lineup of Carlos, Starling, Lucas, or Westry with Bell at the 4 and Freeman at the 5. That could be a really fun 5-out lineup. Do you think that's a lineup that we might be able to see? And do you think Donnie can, as a freshman, play that small ball 5 role?
I think that he can, and I think that was something that was in their back of their minds about how they're going to use him. But then they got another guy. They got a guy from Europe, and I'm not. I don't think Donnie's going to play a ton of the 5. I mean, I think before they got this other guy from Europe, I think maybe they had Peter. I think that they thought maybe that he would play a little bit, Donnie would play a little bit of 5. And, that's what Adrian loves. Adrian loves those kind of long lean guys who can run the floor. So, I mean, I shouldn't say discount it. I don't think he's going to play a ton of 5. He might play some 5, but I don't think he's going to play a ton. But, I think that they're going to be, like I said, such a much better shooting team this year. Their big things to me this year is, can they defend anybody and can they rebound? Those are the two things that they really have to shore up if they want to be better than they were last year. I think they're going to score.
Is this Petar Mastrovic? Is that the European guy?
Yeah.
So is he
Thank
one
you
of
for
these
trying
like,
to say his last name because I don't really know how to say it.
is he one of these like 20 21-year-old freshmen coming over from Europe?
No, he's young. He's 19.
But he's expected to play.
Well, Adrian says he's good enough to play. You know, whether he plays, I don't know. And because generally speaking, you know, coaches have a 9-10 player at max rotation. And I think last year Syracuse had like a 7 or 8 player rotation, but part of that was because a bunch of guys were hurt. So I don't know if he'll play or not, but he's an intriguing guy. The coaches love him. They say he's a really hard worker. You know, he can step out and shoot the three. He's working on getting a little bit better percentage-wise from the 3-point line. But he's a kind of a typical European big. He can pass the ball, you know, all that. We'll see. Nick,
any other Syracuse questions?
No questions. If you have anything else, Chris, you can go ahead.
Yeah. I guess defensively, one thing they did do well was pressure the ball, and they forced a lot of turnovers. Is that kind of what is that the way that Red wants to play? And do you think that the zone might come back? It was weird. And you reminded me of the beginning call. Like I forgot that, like, it was kind of weird at the beginning of the year that Syracuse wasn't playing a 2-3 zone.
Right. I mean, he wants to play man defense, but are there going to be times when, you know, Naheem is in the game and maybe they'll play a little zone? I don't know. I mean, put him in the middle of the zone. That's probably a pretty big deterrent to guys trying to score in there. They played a little bit of zone last year for different reasons too. But the thing they did, you're right, they turned teams over a lot. And they were much better. And I say this prefacing it by saying they were terrible a couple years before that. They're a few years before that defending the three. They gave up a ton of threes. They gave up a ton of 3-point attempts. The zone just gave up a lot of threes. And they were better last year at not giving up as many threes and contesting the threes that they did give up. They still weren't great at it, but they were better at it than they were in the past.
I remember watching, this was like a year or two ago, and it was so obvious they should have gone out of the zone versus Colgate. And it just was like, they ended up losing the game. And just like, man, y'all should go zone. Speaking of Colgate, though, I do want to say, like, I love how Syracuse schedules, like, the local teams. Like, you guys play Lemoyne, Colgate, Cornell. Like, those are all, like, home run games for these little colleges. And, like, you know, shout out to Syracuse for scheduling those games.
Yeah, and, you know, Jim Boeheim was really, that was a point of emphasis for him. He wanted to play those teams. And Adrian's been the same way since then. And you know what? Colgate and Cornell are pretty good. You know, if you bring another mid-major in here or a low major in here, they're not going to be better than those two teams. So you might as well, like, you know, reward your, like, sort of hometown area teams. And Lemoyne is interesting. You know, they had a pretty good season last year in their first season of Division I. So it'll be interesting to see. You know, Cornell has a new coach. Colgate has a coach that everybody talks about every season in March. And we'll see how those two teams are going to be this year.
I'm going to miss watching Judah Mintz play. I love Judah. I know some people weren't as warm to him, especially Wake fans. Apparently Wake fans just did not like him. I really like Judah Mintz. But one last thing I want to leave with, Donna. So tell me this, hypothetically speaking, if Syracuse surprises people and is a top 6 ACC team, why did that happen? And then on the flip side, if Syracuse is a bottom 5 ACC team, presuming health, why would that happen?
Well, if they're a top 5 ACC team, they're going to guard better and they're going to rebound better. I keep coming back to those two things that they were terrible at last year. I mean, you take a 20-win team, if they were just a little better in either of those categories, they could guard inside better, if they could guard better in general, and if they could rebound the ball, I think they would have been, you know, they could have been a potential tournament team. Those are the two things. They need to also be able to shoot the ball better. They were not a very good shooting team last year, and I think they will be a better shooting team this year. But, you know, I say that a lot. I say that a lot before every season is I think they'll be a better shooting team. And you never know, like, once this game starts, what's going to happen. But I think the presence of Eddie is going to help the shooters because I think the shooters are going to get a lot more space than they did when Syracuse didn't have Eddie. So that's my little mini prediction about the Qs.
And then you think if they're at the bottom, it's because they just don't improve in those areas at all?
Right. Exactly. They will not improve. They will not have improved in either of those two areas. Yeah.
Well, there you have it. Thank you so much for joining us, Donna. I think at the very least, this is going to be a fun team with Lance and with a young 5-star freshman like that, and Starling continuing to hit his stride, and with Chris Bell filling it up from deep. So,
and we didn't talk about Elijah Moore, who's a freshman who's a really good shooter. You know, I don't know how much Elijah's going to play, but he can really shoot the ball.
Is he a 3-4 kind of guy?
He's like he's like a more of a 2-3 kind of guy, but he's I don't think he's going to play too much 4. He's not that big. He's not that tall.
Cool. Well, got an eye on him as well. Thank you so much for joining us, Donna. Take care.
All right. Take care. See you guys.